Hello and welcome back to the Green Style Raglan Sewalong. I'm Sarah and I work with Green Style Creations and I blog at sewingwithsarah.com, and I'm excited to have you back today. We're going to continue working on our raglans. Now, just to kind of review what we talked about yesterday, you have the option of either making the women's center field raglan, possibly with some add-ons, or the men's Hudson pullover for the sew-along, or maybe even both if you want to have some coordinating outfits. That can always be a fun thing for holiday photos or just to kind of have some coordinating outfits. I know I spend a lot of time trying to make coordinating outfits for my daughter and I, but I don't spend very much time trying to make coordinating tops for my husband and I. So this is kind of a fun project for me. Yesterday we talked about going over some supplies that we would need for the pattern. We talked about fit and sizing, and then we went ahead and cut out our fabric using our pattern pieces. So today we're going to continue on from there. We're going to be doing some basic work, just kind of sewing the sleeves and the body of the raglan together. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, a raglan is a pretty simple project, so you have the option, if you choose to do so, to mix it up a little bit. You can add some sleeve ruching, some elbow patches. If you want to, you could use one of the add-ons for the women's center field to add a hood or a cowl neck. We're not going to be sewing those today, but that would be something that we would work on tomorrow. You can also, on the men's, you have the option of adding the zipper front or the hood, or just doing a banded neckline. For myself, for my husband, he's requested a banded neckline pullover, so that's what I'm going to be doing for him. But if you are going to be sewing the men's Hudson and you want to add that front zipper, you would want to do that first today. I'm not going to be showing those steps, but they're very well written in the instructions, and I'm happy to answer any questions as you have them. But that would be something that you would want to do to the front of the shirt before you go ahead and sew the side seams, or the sleeve seams, I'm sorry, which is what we're going to be working on today. If your guy also wants a front, like kind of kangaroo pocket, that would be something else that you would want to go ahead and do to the front of the top before sewing the sleeves on. It's just easiest to do that when you have a smaller piece of fabric to work with. But once you've done that, or if you're skipping those options for either the men's or the women's shirt, you're going to go ahead and continue with me now as we sew the sleeves onto the bodice of our shirts. So I'm going to go ahead and take you down to my cutting table, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Again, this is a pretty simple process, but it's great to see. I always like to see a video of how it's done, and I'm going to be adding one or two small touches to it just to kind of increase the longevity of my garment, and I'll show you how I do that. So let's head on down to the cutting table and we'll get started. So I've got the front of my shirt laid out here. This is for the center field. If you're doing the men's, you would just lay out the front of the Hudson. And like I said earlier in the video, if you are adding the zipper front to the men's Hudson or the kangaroo pocket down below, you would want to assemble those before continuing with these steps. But if you're just having a basic front with no zipper and no kangaroo pocket, you're going to follow me right here. And this will be your first step. So you've got your front laid out. You're going to grab your sleeve piece, and you want to kind of notice if you marked those curves, that's great as to which is the front and the back. If you didn't, you'll notice the back tends to be higher and longer of a curve than the front curve. So you just want to make sure that you're matching up the front curve with the front of your bodice. So this is my front. I'm going to put a little clip in it right there, and then I have the front of my top here. So I'm just going to put these right sides together and clip them in a couple of places, making sure that this lines up. Now the seam allowance on both of these patterns is 3/8 of an inch, so you should have a little dog ear at the top that kind of sticks up, and then the rest should fit on with that, so that when you sew at 3/8, it'll be perfectly right along there. Okay, and you're going to want to do that with the other sleeve as well. Go ahead and clip it in place. So again, I'm making sure that you're sewing the front curve, front sleeve curve to the front of the bodice. Having a little bit of a tip there sticking out. And then just clipping it another time in the middle. So Just gonna go over and sew this. You can either sew this with like a small zigzag, a lightning bolt stitch, or with your serger. I'm gonna use my serger, but it's perfectly fine to do this with a ballpoint needle and some regular thread on your sewing machine. Another option, of course, is to add decorative top stitching. So if you have a cover stitch machine or a sewing machine with some fancy stitches, once you sew that seam, you could add some decorative top stitching if you wanted to. Again, totally optional. It gives it a little bit more of a sporty look. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those, and then I'll come back and show you the next step. At this point, you should have, this is the front bodice, and you've sewn those 2 front sleeve seams. Now you can grab your back bodice piece, and you're going to take the sleeve. This is the back curve of the sleeve, and you're just going to clip it right sides together with the back bodice. So you're going to do that on both sides. I just think it's more efficient to do both of them at once, although you could do them one at a time. So you're going to end up with kind of a big old circle of fabric. I've got those 2, so I'm going to sew those 2 back seams, assembling the back bodice and the sleeves, and then I'll come back and show you how to sew the side seams. So now I've sewn those back shoulder seams, and now you're just going to lay the front of your raglan on top of the back, and you're going to, I'm going to turn my shirt sideways here, match up. First, you're always going to want to match up that underarm seam, and I like to push one seam allowance this way and one that way, just so that they are kind of flatter. Don't have any extra bulk there. So I usually put a clip there. And if you're OCD about that matching, you could put a pin and then peek in and make sure that it matched well. And then all the way down to the bottom of the shirt. I always put a clip at the bottom because sometimes when you only put a clip at the top and you just assume that they're going to match up, the differential feed of your serger or tugging on the fabric a little bit can make them kind of get off there. So the same thing all the way to the top, to the wrist opening of your sleeve. You're going to stick a clip in there. You might want to stick one extra clip in the sleeve if you're doing the long sleeve version. So there you have, you're going to sew all the way from the wrist opening all the way down past the armpit all the way down to the hem of the shirt. This is the beauty of a raglan. Super simple like that. And you're going to flip it over, of course, and do the same to the other side. This is an opportunity where if you haven't made the top before, you're wondering how it's going to fit, you can baste it together along this long seam at 3/8 of an inch and see how it fits you. And if you need to let it out a little bit, you can do that by just sewing maybe a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's amazing how much of a difference that makes sometimes. Or you can take a deeper seam allowance in some areas or all the way down. So it's a quick kind of little fitting bit that you can do as you sew. Doesn't give you, the 3/8 inch seam allowance doesn't give you a ton of wiggle room, but it does give you a little bit. So I've got that clipped, and now just check and make sure that it looks like a shirt. If you accidentally, sometimes an error that people make is they sew the front together as if it were the sleeve, and then of course the sleeves are too narrow for your body to get through, so that doesn't end up very well. So that's just something to keep in mind if it's one of your first times sewing a raglan, or if sometimes I make this mistake because I'm just not paying attention. So just double check that, and then go ahead and sew both of those side and sleeve seams, and we'll come back and check out what we've got. So I've sewed those 2 side seams. I've got something that looks a lot like a shirt now. One of the things I do just to improve the longevity of my clothes is that I double sew for a few inches above and below the armpit seam. For some reason, I find that if my clothes are going to pull apart, the for some reason this is where it's going to happen. So I just kind of do a double serging there. It just makes them last a little bit longer, and I hate to fix things after I've made them, so it saves me that. So if you are just, you know, making the basic raglan, this is what it's going to look like. You would do the same thing for the men's. You can turn it right side out now if you'd like. And all it's missing at this point is something to finish the opening. So something to finish the neck, and I'm going to be adding a cowl to this one tomorrow. Something to finish the sleeves. You could add cuffs, thumb-hole cuffs, or just hem them. And then something to finish the hem, just kind of either a band. I cut the curved hem on this one, so I'll just be hemming that. And then you'll be good to go. So we're going to go ahead and do the rest of that work tomorrow. Now, keep in mind that if you are planning on doing some, I'll throw up a video tomorrow for the thumb hole cuffs that you can add as well. And if you were, you know, planning on adding the elbow patches, not shoulder patches, that's very 1980s. Elbow patches, you would have wanted to do that before you sewed up your top. And that would be something you would have marked out the location for based on the pattern piece, and then added those before you sewed the sleeve together, because now it's too narrow to get through. So I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier, but hopefully it's still in time for you. But definitely post some comments. Let me know what you're sewing up and how things are coming along. If you're turning this into something for yourself or something for a friend, raglans make great gifts because they're so quick. So I can't wait to see what you guys are sewing up, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for our day 3.